Hmm. Hello, good morning, and good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on using Selenium for SAP applications and business process testing, supported by our solutions, INT4 Service Virtualization. My name is Marcin Gałczyński, and I'm the head of product for INT4 suite of service virtualization and API testing products. And today with me, we have Tomasz Maćkowski. Tomek.
Hi, my name is Tomasz Maćkowski. I'm head architect for INT4 service virtualization product.
And we're going to take you through the content. We've prepared some, I guess, exciting information specifically regarding the using Selenium for SAP testing, with a lot of learning that we had from our work, and I hope this will be an interesting time well spent for you. A few notes for today. The session is being recorded, so all the participants are muted. You'll have to get the chance to get the recording and slides in your email by next week, so the content will be available later on. And one more thing, there is a chat window available where you can put your questions. We will be conducting the presentation without any interruption, and then we have a slot for Q&A at the end, where we will be answering the questions from the chat. Okay, a few words about us as a company. As INT4, we strive to bring a complete SAP testing landscape automation and make sure that business continuity specifically for integration can be done very quickly. We do have a scriptless SAP API testing tool that secures a lot of situations where the growth of the company is let's say closely tied with interfaces and integrations, and we are aim to eliminate the risks related to the construction and testing of the integration and interfaces. And so why Selenium? You might ask. Well, our solution also relies heavily in some of the testing scenarios on the ability to integrate with external solutions, especially for the processes where integration like EDI or any other type of X12 business messages basically are being exchanged. But to simulate the full process, you need to also execute some steps through the user interface. And this is how we run into, let's say, working with Selenium and enabled Selenium integration in our toolkit. Good then. I don't know, Thomas, if you want to add anything to that, or maybe we can just jump to the next slide of the presentation.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so quickly, what is Selenium? If you're on this webinar, so you probably heard the name before. It's open source software for web browser automation. We will not repeat what is written on the website. I think the key elements is that Selenium brings us two blocks. One is the WebDriver, which actually can execute scripts on the user interface of the specific browser, enabling you to actually automate anything that happens in the web browser. And together, Selenium also provides a browser plugin for recording and playback on the browser interaction. So from our perspective, it's like brings the feature of a UI testing tool where you can record the user action, and then you can play it back to execute testing. Selenium is quite useful in web application automation for testing purposes, as we hope to show. It supports the major browsers, so it's Firefox, Explorer, Safari, and a multitude of other browsers, which are including Microsoft Edge recently based on the Chromium engine, so Google Chrome, of course, and so on. There is an option to use Selenium Server, which enables some scalability. So of course you can run Selenium locally on your machine to play around, but you can also run it on another machine or even set of virtual machines and then distribute the testing tasks to those machines, which enables like quick organization of testing for multiple types of browsers or even operating systems for your application. Now the key point for us is that as Selenium works also well for SAP web-based interface, either the simple kind of a web shop or the SAP Fiori applications, as we're going to show today. And this is where it nicely ties into the broader picture of SAP API testing. And I think, last but not least, as being an open source application, it doesn't need any type of license investment for the organization. It's quite easy to adopt it and run. Good then. So I made some promises. Tomek, would you be able to do a quick demonstration now of the startup of the Selenium and how it's being run on installed?
Yes, can you just confirm that you see my screen?
Yes, we do see your screen with the Click Meeting desktop application right now.
Okay, so what I will now show you, I switch to a remote server where we operate the demo Selenium installation. So this is Windows Server. This could be also another operating system where we basically will install and run the Selenium server for the purpose of this demonstration. So actually Selenium server is just an executable which can be downloaded from the Selenium website. So there is no actual installation. You have just to download it, deploy, and then run, unless you, for example, want to run it as a service in Windows Startup. What is also important that you need so-called drivers for each browser you would like to test. And the drivers should be accessible by the server, so they should be placed in the same folder or in the executable path of the server. So starting the Selenium server is basically triggering this executable, and I have here a simple PowerShell script which basically just runs this Java application. This could be a bash script or any other way to basically start this. So I will now run this command, and the Selenium server is a simple web server. By default, it starts on port 444, and now it's already up and running. What it means now is that a Selenium server is listening for commands, and it's exposing an API where you can start automating test cases. As you might have noticed, I've run it in the standalone mode. So what it means is that all the components will be run on this machine. And as Martin mentioned, there are also different modes. For example, you can have server on one machine and so-called testing nodes on distributed machines. So then server can, when you are running test case on a server, it can distribute execution to different nodes. And those nodes can be different, for example, different operating systems or different browsers. But for the sake of the demo, we will run it in standalone mode. I can also
Tomasz, maybe before you go further, I have a question. At least I remember my experience with Windows and Java in general being a little bit of pain. I mean, finding the right version of Java to install and then the patch settings. That I remember this is something which wasn't very simple. So here, did you have to do anything special to get up Java running on this Windows server, or was it kind of straightforward?
No, it just requires Java runtime environment. and you just need to have Java added to your binaries path, so that the script can pick it up. But then, other than that, there are no dependencies.
Okay, okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, so to verify it's up and running, you can also open this web server in browser, which is displaying the simple page that's confirming that Selenium is up and running and waiting for test execution. Okay, so that's pretty much how we can operate it or start the server. And now back to you, Martin.
Thank you, Thomas. So yeah, we did want to provoke you a little bit right now with the presentation. So that's what we would normally think about UI testing tools. Yeah, so you can enter the tool, record a session, record the steps, and then click play, and you'd hope, hey, it should be working. Yeah? So I guess Thomas will give you much more details, but we've seen issues that the way modern applications, web applications are built is usually uh, close to the model you could hear about the progressive web application, where you basically open a web page and then a lot of things are happening in the background. So there's a lot of JavaScript on that web page, a lot of scripting that actually modifies the page element, displays the elements. I mean, you start typing something, you get a pop-up, you're pressing a button and you need to wait a moment for the user interface in the backend to react, and all those elements are actually playing a key role in how the script should be recorded, um, how it should be played back, and sometimes very simple issues like typing, where the Selenium IDE recorder will record it in a specific way, and you actually have to modify it to work in a different way, in a different mode. Um, that's I think a key area where at least we have seen that there's a lot of mm, experience needed, at least, and a little bit of learning on how to progress with recording and playing back a Selenium script. So Tomek will now take you through it, how it happens in the real life, and we'll look at those challenges as we go on.
Yes, thank you, Martin. So what I will present now is a simple recording of a Fiori application. It's a standard app for sales order creation. And with this example, I will describe some of the challenges which Martin mentioned, which are not specific to SAP Fiori per se, but they are quite common in this technology, because Fiori is basically based on SAP UI5 library, which is JavaScript, and so there are a lot of asynchronous operations in the background, partial screen updates, and that's quite challenging when it comes to web application automated testing. So there are some specific steps where you have to review the recorded script and adjust it manually to make sure it's consistent, and you can consistently run it and expect the same results, which is key for test automation. Okay, so to record it, I will use Selenium IDE, which is basically delivered as an browser extension. Can be downloaded from Chrome Store or as an extension to Firefox. And then it's visible here as an extension button. So in Selenium IDE, the projects you have to create a project. So that's how the test cases are organized. And then within a project, you can create test suites and test cases. I will create a project which will be a placeholder for a test case. Now I have to provide the base URL of the application I'll be testing. So I'll just take the URL of the create sales order app. And now I can start recording. So this IDE is opening a new session, and you have an ID indication that now it's being recorded. You see the page is loading. Just choose a standard sales order type and click create button. Okay, I will not go through all the sales order creation step, but what we already have should be enough to illustrate the concept. So I'll just close this one. As you can see, that's actually the result of the recording. So Selenium records set of commands, which basically emulate the user interactions. And then this recording can be replayed. So it basically now Selenium will repeat all the steps. So we should see that just 1 second. I see that the URL was not copied correctly. In the comment. So that should be the sales order. Yeah, so that's the playback. And here we will see the first typical challenge is that Selenium will try to actually enter this order type before the pop-up is visible. And you can see that it couldn't find the element, and that's because it took some time to load the Fiori app and all the metadata, and Selenium tried to input the value before the pop-up was already there. So that's one of the examples where basically you have to review and update the script manually. So usual solution for such situation is to insert new command manually. So this is also possible. So not only you can record, but also insert commands manually. And add a command for element to be visible. And yeah, actually before we type in, we will wait for this element to be. There is a timeout in milliseconds. So how long we should wait? And now if we try to run it again, yeah, we can see that now Selenium could find the input element, enter the data, and the test was executed successfully. So that's one of the typical things which you encounter while testing Fiori applications. The other example will be, for example, the control IDs. So Selenium is trying to identify all the controls by the unique ID, and some of the IDs in Fiori apps are so-called stable. So it means that they are always the same, and they are consistently named. And you can see, for example, this sales order input field, which is a sales order type. It's called like this in a standard app, and you can use it to address the field. But for example, the create button has automatically generated ID, which is in this instance it's called button 15. But then on different machine or in different login session, this ID will be regenerated. So to have a consistent test recording and replay, we should find a better way to identify this button. So Selenium gives you some other possibilities. So by default, it identifies by ID, but you can also identify, for example, by specific CSS attributes or XPath. So if you, for example, know what is the button label, in this case, it's better to address the button like this, because even if this button 15 ID is regenerated, your test case will still run. This is also a common challenge in Fiori apps, and some others which we observed is, for example, handling the logon page. So making sure that every time you start and run the test case in the consistent environment, because as you have noticed that I was currently logged in to the Fiori Launchpad, and I didn't get a login prompt. But if we start this test case on a fresh machine, there will be a logon window. So then the test case should be smart enough to handle those situations, and I will show you later how this can be handled. Okay, so these are that was the short introduction to the recording environment, and also to the typical challenges when automating the SAP Fiori web UI. And now I will hand over back to you, Martin, for the next part.
Thank you, Tomek. I really liked how you showed that Selenium already gave you some other options to select that button. Yeah, so that's, you didn't have to do anything. You had those options already proposed by Selenium, the different ways to capture that specific button.
Yeah,
like by ID, by CSS, by something else. Yes. Okay, okay, that's quite nice. So I mean, so the challenges from our perspective starts when you want to go beyond the single application testing. Yes, and this is where we believe that our tooling and the integration with UI testing tools brings a lot of value. And the key business that we are in with INT4 is around virtualization. So what you see here is a kind of an example of a situation in a company. So the company in the middle, let that be the business that you're working for, that you're running in, and such business would be usually operating with partners, with either customers, third-party logistic providers, with suppliers. And in today's connected world, most of the exchange of the information between those parties happens directly through the interfaces, through EDI, X12, or other means of connectivity that is allowing you to quickly exchange the data with your business partners. And the challenge for that is when you're trying to test such an environment. And from the testing perspective, it's quite easy to actually test when you actually have a partner on the other side. But if you think about modifying your system, if you think about working with external parties, then it's not so easy to get access to their test systems to set up a test environment. And that happens because to have such environments, like to be able to simulate the company B or company C, you would need to worry about master data, about a specific hardware platform, find people to support it, and so on. And it doesn't even have to be your own partner. I mean, think about your SAP system connected to some internal financial system or any other reporting system. Um, where testing would mean that you actually not only need to have a test version of that other system, but also take care about data, have people to manage that system, have people to work on that system, and having this all in place is actually quite challenging. So I mentioned this testing setup gap between the SAP systems being interconnected and worrying about master data, worrying about availability of the other systems. And the other part in testing is that the integration is a kind of a black hole into end-to-end testing. And what I mean by that is if you think about an interface, oh, sorry, let me start from Selenium. If you think about Selenium testing, it's limited to that one system in that sense that Tomek recorded a screen and he was able to push a play button and then he tested whether the behavior of the system is correct. That's easy. But when you think about integration, it usually takes around 2 or 3 systems in along the way. So that external system sending you the data, the system that is receiving the data, and the system that is in the middle. So the middleware that would be responsible for conversion of the formats, routing of the messages, and so on. And then testing that is again time consuming because when something doesn't go right, there's actually not one but at least 2 or 3 places where things needs to be validated. So we come with our tooling, which helps in such a scenarios. And what we want to show you today is not only the Selenium part, but also how Selenium and our tool could work together to enable testing of end-to-end business processes. So what we do is we basically focus on the messages that are exchanged between the systems, and what we allow for is the validation of the messages as they are being processed via the integration platform and within the backend system uh, for correctness against a previously recorded or a previously defined test case. So our aim is to say, hey, you don't need that external system anymore. You can actually use IFTT to validate those messages, to validate the behavior of your system in the middle, and to validate even the business documents as they go on. And when we think about virtualization, we do achieve that by being able to actually act in the terms of the checking the content or generating the content for those messages that are being exchanged. In the simple scenario that we have on the screen, uh, a purchase order entered by an operator would send an XML request to vendor. Then the vendor would need to do something like click a button, confirm something, and send back the dispatch advice. That's how the normal business would run. Of course, in the testing scenario, you don't have that vendor around you to do it. So you either have to simulate it somehow, virtualize it, or agree with that vendor to cooperate with you during testing, which obviously isn't that easy to get going. So here, IFTT will be in position to actually generate that vendor response and validate the request that you've sent to them. And Tomek will show a little bit more of that in the demo, specifically by joining the pieces together. Um, but one other thing that I wanted to highlight is that the validation of business data in SAP is also something that we can help with on top. So if you remember the recording that Tomek showed, he was working on a create sales order process. Um, but then, how do you know if the sales order was created correctly? So normally, what we've seen in the past is that you use the UI testing tool to open a sales order view screen, sales order display screen, and going through it for and checking various fields. So you'd actually have to record that you check the value in each and every field to find that maybe there are some differences as we are showing on the screen. And one of the things that we will be able to show you today is that such a validation can be actually done automatically by our solution within the SAP system landscape, where we can actually compare the data in the database um, directly mm, through reading fields, through reading tables, and analyzing the differences, if any, and being able to report on them, whether they are expected, like a date and time change, or whether they would be meaning a failure if there's actually a wrong data being captured in the database. So, Tomek, are we able to showcase a little bit those features that I mentioned?
Yes, of course. So I'll back to screen sharing. So now I will show you how Selenium integrates with IFTT. But maybe before I do it, I'll just make a brief introduction to IFTT itself and the user interface. So what you can see now is our testing solution IFTT cockpit, which is basically a list of test scenarios, and they can combine different technologies. So as Martin mentioned, test cases for different integration platforms for backend. Also, we can integrate Selenium test cases here. So how do you bring the Selenium test case to IFTT, and how do you execute them? So I will switch back to Selenium IDE and my recorded test script. So what you can do from this IDE is to save the project. I will just save it in my desktop folder, and it creates as IDE file. And if we examine this file, it's basically a JSON representation of all the settings and all the comments which were recorded by Selenium. And this SIDE file can be imported to IFTT as one of the test types. So there's a specific test type for Selenium, and then we just import it as test case content, you see that that's basically the same as ID JSON, and then it's ready for IFTT to be executed within our test framework. Of course, there are some connectivity settings required, which is basically a one-time administrative task so that IFTT knows where to execute them. But once the test case is imported, you can run it from our environment, which I will do now. So IFTT is configured to run the test case on the same remote server where I started the Selenium in our first demo. So I'll just execute it. And actually can switch to this remote desktop. And we should see that test case is running. So as you can notice that there is this specific message or toolbar, which is basically an indication that Chrome is controlled by automated test software, which means it's controlled by Selenium WebDriver currently. So that's the recording of series order creation. Which should basically take us through all the steps until we get the order number. Okay, 44712 order was created. The browser is closed, so now I can go back to my IFTT environment. So I will close this remote desktop. And we see the test execution report for this test case, which was run just now. So the test case passed, and we can see that IFTT also captured the sales order number and also extracted it to a variable. And that's quite important because, as we will show later in the webinar, you can use those variables to pass them to subsequent test cases. For example, for validation or for integration with other systems. And then IFTT can orchestrate the entire business process, exchanging the parameters and data between different test steps and actually different test technologies and systems.
Tomek, just one thing that I think would be great to explain to the audience was that this customer order number, that's also changing. So are you actually modifying the Selenium script on the fly to get a different order number every time?
Yes, that's one of the key features of IFTT, where IFTT can actually adjust or modify the parameters or execution variables before before execution, and it's available for all our test types, and including Selenium. So I will not go through all the details of the configuration, but basically just to mention that we have so-called IFTT automation object, which is a configuration telling IFTT how to operate. And then in this configuration, you can specify a variable. For example, here the customer order number was specified. And variables can have processors. So in this case, I'm selecting the value from the Selenium test script and replacing it with a new value, which is based on the number range. So it means that with each execution, we are getting the unique customer order number, which then we can use to identify the sales order which was created during execution.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's fantastic. So you mean you can record one script and modify it before running so that it can be suited for like a different scenario or to, I don't know, manage even master data differences between systems and so on? Would that be possible?
Yeah, you can. So variables offer you different options and possibilities. You can have master data mapping. You can generate some random or unique IDs. You can insert dates, for example, if you have specific requirements for example, posting date. So IFTT can instrument such test cases and provide default values before the test case execution. So it's additional layer of flexibility on top of the Selenium script.
Okay. Well, I think it's time, Tomek, that we try to put it all together. Have just one more slide, basically that shows, I think, what we mostly believe where the value comes for using IFTT and using other tools. I mean, in this webinar, we focus on Selenium and its particularities, but we also operate with other UI testing tools, SAP specific and non-SAP specific. And I think it's a great power there to be actually able to run all the validation steps and the manual steps in one go. Yeah, so think about it like if you would be doing your normal test execution without any automation for a sales order entry scenario. Yeah? So you would have somebody manually doing the order entry, then you would have the sales order created in the SAP database. So somebody would need to go and validate whether the sales order was created correctly with the right data being captured, and then in our scenario, we're also sending an order confirmation, which goes to a customer saying, hey, your order have been captured, and we're confirming with this XML or EDI message that the order is okay. So think about how you would test that normally. Is you probably would have some user do the order entry, then somebody doing the validation, then maybe some other person from the integration team validating that the confirmation was okay. So like 3 people probably working in 2 different systems. I don't know, half a day, mm, maybe 1 hour if you all sit in one room. Maybe half an hour if you're really excited during cutover execution. But still, what we want to show is that by combining the power of UI testing tools like Selenium and the abilities offered by IFTT, including the backend validation and testing of interfaces, you can actually execute it all much faster and have it all validated and reported within a single step. So Tomek, I think off to you to show the final demo.
Yes, thank you. So I will switch back to our test cockpit, where we have a end-to-end test scenario prepared. And just to explain what it means, so we have 3 test cases in a folder. First one is the Selenium script, which will be creating the sales order. And then we have 2 test cases which are depending on it. So they are linked through parent relation. It means they will be executed after Selenium script, and they will inherit the values which are created and extracted out of Selenium script to do the validation. So in this scenario, we will validate the sales order in SAP S/4HANA tables. So if everything was created correctly, and we will also validate if the order confirmation IDOC was triggered out of the system, and if the IDOC content is correct. So I will now execute those 3 test cases, and the UI part we can still switch to the remote desktop and observe these steps. and then the validation will be done by IFTT as a subsequent steps right after the Selenium script is done.
Yeah, I think just for the audience that maybe works a little bit less with SAP, the IDOC is a type of a message that SAP system is sending out. So what can normally happen at that SAP will send out an IDOC, and then that IDOC will get probably converted by an integration platform to an EDI message, X12 message, or XML file that is then going to a partner and represent some business information. And I think one other thing that is interesting that we should point the attention to is that we have actually explicitly said that those test cases are connected in a kind of a parent-child relationship. So it's like the first test case with the order creation is now being run as a parent, but then the other two, the IDOC and DB assertion, are depending on that test case. So we specifically say, hey, yes, do this and then compare that specific document. Okay, back to you, Tomek.
Yes, thank you, Martin. So as you can see, the part which took most of the time was the UI execution. That's actually the usual way you have it in your test executions, that UI is time consuming, but the API testing it's really fast, and you can execute it within seconds to validate complex scenarios. So let's just review the results. So first we had this Selenium script, which basically create a sales order, and we saw that that was the order number 44713. Then we had the two test cases, which were the child scenarios. So first one was the IDOC outbound. So basically, IFTT was able to log into the S4HANA system and check if there was IDOC confirmation sent for this order. And as we will see, so that's the comparison of the IDOC document, and IFTT can ignore some of the fields. For example, creation time, which will be different, always different between the documents, but the other fields are compared and checked for any actual business differences. So if, for example, if there was a different price, material, or difference on the other field, or difference in the IDOC structure, IFTT can report it, detect and report it automatically. I think that's the actual order which was captured by FTT. And the last step was also validating that order at S4HANA tables level. So that's if you are familiar with SAP terminology, we have the sales order header, which is the VBAC, order items, partners, and also the business segment. So the tables which are verified and also the fields, it's something we can configure. We also provide some predefined templates for this. And actually it's very easy and very fast to verify all the fields across different related tables. And validating tens or hundreds of fields in different screens will take a lot of time in UI. And here with IFTT, you can execute it in seconds and make sure that all the data is as you expected on the both table level and also for the exchanged messages.
Okay, so let's stay on this screen for a moment. So 1 minute 13 seconds to simulate sales order creation, validate the outgoing business document, and validate the data in the database that the sales order was actually created correctly. Yes.
Yes. Just one also thing to mention is that as the majority of the time was spent on the Selenium test script, but you can also shave off some time from this step because there is a parameter to basically control speed of Selenium execution, and I've added some delay just to be able to observe the actual script execution. But this can be executed at a bit faster pace. So I think you can easily take half of the time for this scenario, which is I think quite impressive.
Indeed, and again in this scenario, the Selenium is running on some external virtual machine, and we're just using IFTT to call it. So we wouldn't even need to watch it run. Yes, it would just happen on that virtual machine and do the job. Yes.
Yeah. So I was switching to the remote desktop, to the remote Selenium machine, just to show you that it's actually running there. But you can have a tester sitting in one location, having just access to IFTT, and your Selenium test machines in your data center, and they don't even have to have access to those machines. It will just run in the background, and IFTT will just orchestrate the entire scenario. So actually, all your test user need is access to IFTT cockpit, and once you have IFTT configured to connect to your middlewares, to your Selenium grid, you can actually operate report on all your test cases from this single cockpit.
Okay then, Tomek, thank you very much for this excellent demo, and this kind of concludes our webinar. We have now time for our QA session. However, I don't see too many questions there. There was one question from Rinesh about adding a step to wait for a loaded element while you were showing the first recording demo, and then we've already, I believe, answered that. So maybe we will leave just 1 or 2 minutes if anybody else will have a question. We're happy to take them now. Please type your questions in the chat window. So there's a question from Moritz. Let me just bring up the Q&A mode. Where is it?
I will, yeah. I think we clicked the same thing.
Okay. Is it possible to synchronize test results with ALML tools like Solman? Yes. From IFTT perspective, I mean, so for Selenium itself, not of course, but IFTT is a SAP add-on. It's a tool dedicated for SAP testing, and it integrates quite well with Solution Manager. So if you think about your test suite and Solution Manager, test management tools, then that's clearly possible. I think, Tomek, we also had an integration with HP, or now it's Micro Focus ALM.
Yes, that's possible. So we have customers which have Micro Focus ALM as their primary test management tool, and you can actually import the IFTT test structure there and execute it from ILM, and then report on the results from ILM directly. So this would include also the UI steps, and so depending on your setup of on your test landscape, The IFTT could be the primary test management and execution tool, or you can operate your existing central test tool and use IFTT for execution, and then you will basically report in ALM or Solman.
Okay, we have another question. Does it support to test other SAP cloud solutions such as SuccessFactors or Ariba? So as far as I do know those tools, they are web-based tools that you could use Selenium to test the UI steps on those tools as well. SuccessFactors is not based on Fiori for sure. That's a dedicated application, and I think Ariba even uses Fiori for the user interface. So Selenium could be used, but basically Selenium can be used for any web application. Yes, there's no limitation to this or that tool. If it's a web browser accessible application, you can automate testing of that application in Selenium.
Yeah, and just to add that SuccessFactors integration with S4 is usually done with SAP Integration Suite or Cloud Platform Integration, as it was called before, and IFTT can automate testing of CPI interfaces. So with this, you can combine, for example, testing UI in SuccessFactors and then testing the message exchange with the backend via CPI.
So question from Rinesh, is it possible to test in SAP BW?
I mean, here, I'm not sure what specific part of BW would like to test, but I think the core principles are the same. So you could use our UI integration for testing, for example, the reports. And if you'd like to test the message exchange or the data exchange, that's on the integration layer. So I think in general I would say yes, but I think it would make sense to dive deeper offline into such scenarios.
So yes, can we avoid hard coding data? Can we export Excel sheet data? So in terms of hard coding, I mean, we are always starting with some reference messages and some reference data, in that sense that we need to have some frame for the test script. So as you've seen messages or data in the database or the Selenium test script, we have a starting point. And as Tomek shown, in that message, we can actually replace data using the concept of variables, and the concept of variables enables you to actually substitute data within our test data, either by generating them or providing them manually, or providing them through an API. So the data will be, there will be some data in the reference example, but we can modify the reference example using variables, so that we can execute various scenarios outside of the out of one, let's say, set of test cases. Can we attach screenshot of application in test results report? So no, at this moment, Selenium is not doing that for us. So we have a log of execution that is repeatable, but it doesn't take screenshots along the way. So at this moment, the solution will not take screenshots from test execution. Can we provide verification steps? Not sure if I'm getting the question fully.
Maybe I can answer. So there are two ways you can do it. So first of all, Selenium itself has some verification commands where you can verify the UI with assertions, and then the Selenium test script can pass or fail based on this. And as we have shown in the demo, you can also add IFTT validation steps to actually check the results. So be it the actual document which is posted in backend, or the subsequent integration messages which are generated out of this action. So if you are interested in pure UI validation, this can be done in the script itself, but I think if we look at testing business processes, usually the validating the outcomes gives much more coverage, and it's much faster if it's done on the IFTT level.
Thank you, Tomek. And then finally, tiles will be changed frequently as some get depreciated, newly added. So how will we manage that? I guess that relates to the example you gave with the confirm button.
Yeah, so tiles, tiles usually change between S/4HANA releases. Some of the apps are being phased out and replaced by new one. And in this case, it's not only the tile which is changing, but actually the entire application. So then you have to just re-record the test script from scratch. And it's not actually something you can avoid with any tool. It's just you have to basically respond to the fact that application changed. And on the more granular level, if there are some changes within application, for example, as I mentioned, the lack of stable IDs, then the solution is to find them by some other means. So not by ID, but for example, by name or by some relations. For example, you can find a parent which has stable ID and then traverse to the children. So it's then application-specific analysis which has to be done. But as with any UI testing tool, there is some efforts for ongoing maintenance of test scripts. As the application which is under testing is changing, you have to adjust the scripts. And actually, that's one of the advantages of the API testing. And as APIs tend to be more stable, and API test cases are, I would say, not only much faster, but also much more consistent in terms of execution. So if you cannot, some of the steps cannot be automated with API, you have to record the UI. But for mass testing and for integration testing, that's why we always advocate for API testing at its for its consistency and performance.
Okay. Good then. Tomek, thank you. Tomek, thank you for the answers. I think we're at the top of the hour already, 4 minutes past the time. I don't see any other questions. So thank you very much to the attendees for being with us today. If there are still any questions, you can contact us via email, our webpage, or our LinkedIn profile. Thank you very much for your attention, and depending on the hemisphere, I wish you a great evening or a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
INT4 IFTT, leader in SAP-centric automated integration testing.